So let's talk about a guy named Rédoine Faïd. This is a man who saw crime not just as a job, but as an art form. You see, he didn't just commit robberies, he directed them, and his scripts, they were Hollywood gangster films. This is a wild story of insane planning, unbelievable escapes, and a life that totally blurred the line between the movies and reality. So let's get into it, the story of a man who lived his life one heist at a time. It's the ultimate movie trope, right? The impossible escape. But for Rédoine Faïd, this wasn't just some plot on a screen. Nah, this was a challenge, and his target was a place specifically designed to be 100% escape-proof. Just take a look at Rayo Prison. We're talking about 17-foot-high concrete walls, layers of barbed wire, and sniper watchtowers that are manned 24/7. And as if that wasn't enough, the whole place was covered in anti-helicopter netting. The message here was pretty clear. Once you're in, you are never, ever getting out. Except someone did. On a sunny morning in July 2018, this so-called impenetrable fortress was cracked wide open. And the whole thing took less time than it takes to make a cup of coffee. To understand how that was even possible, we really need to understand the man behind it all. All right, Section 1. Learning crime from movies. This is where we look at the making of a gangster whose real education didn't come from the streets, but from the silver screen. Rédoine Faïd was born back in 1972 in a pretty rough suburb of Paris. He started early, putting together a little gang when he was just 11, and he quickly moved up from stealing candy to stealing electronics. At 18, he gets arrested for armed robbery. And get this, he's let go with just a warning. Just a warning? That decision would have huge consequences, because by the 1990s, he was one of the most famous robbers in all of France. But what's so wild about Faïd is where he got his inspiration. It wasn't some other famous criminal, it was American movies. He was obsessed. He watched films like Scarface and The Godfather over and over. But his Bible, the one he supposedly watched more than 100 times, was Michael Mann's 1995 masterpiece, Heat. Okay, let's move on to Section 2, the artist of robbery. This is where we're going to see how Faïd didn't just get ideas from movies. He literally recreated entire scenes in his real-life heists. Here's a perfect example. You remember the movie Point Break, right? Where the robbers wear those masks of ex-presidents? Well, Faïd saw that and did his own version. He had his crew hit a jewelry store wearing masks of famous political leaders. And apparently, after the robbery, he even said to the staff, "Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and please don't forget to vote." I mean, the nerve. But his true masterpiece was the Heat heist. In 1997, just 2 years after the movie came out, Faïd and his crew put on hockey masks, just like De Niro's gang, and pulled off a near-perfect copy of the movie's iconic armored truck ambush. For him, this was never just about robbery. It was a performance. It's no surprise his crew called him Le Cerveau, the brain, and he definitely earned it. He studied maps, he timed police response routes, he planned everything with military-like precision. And what was really important to him, at least back then, was that he saw violence as a failure. It ruined the art of the heist. He took pride in getting the money without anyone getting hurt. Which brings us to this really strange intermission in his life story. Section 3, From Convict to Celebrity. After years on the run, the law finally catches up with him, but what happens next is something that absolutely nobody saw coming. So in 1998, he's caught, sentenced to 30 years. But Faïd was charming, a real master manipulator. He became this model prisoner, and because of his charisma and quote-unquote good behavior, he was paroled after only 10 years. He walks out of prison and immediately turns himself into a media star, even co-writing a best-selling book about his life called Outlaw. He went on TV giving all these interviews where he swore he was a changed man. He told one interviewer this bone-chilling line, "My demons aren't asleep, they are dead." He claimed his life of crime was over, that he now just wanted to advise filmmakers on how to make their gangster movies more realistic. And the public? They were fascinated. Yeah, that whole reformed celebrity thing, it didn't last long. And now we get to the big twist in the story. Section 4, Public Enemy Number 1. That charming author persona was about to spectacularly blow up. So while he's on talk shows promoting his book, he was secretly planning another massive heist. And in 2010, the robbery went horribly wrong. A high-speed chase, a shootout with police, it all ended in tragedy. A 26-year-old municipal police officer named Aurélie Fouquet was killed. It was a huge deal, the first time a female officer had been killed on duty in France. Now, Faïd wasn't the one who pulled the trigger, but prosecutors argued he was the mastermind, le cerveau, and the judge agreed. His old sentence came back, and a new one was piled right on top. He was now facing 53 years. At 40 years old, that was pretty much a life sentence. But Faïd had no intention of dying in a cell. In 2013, he staged his first incredible escape. Using explosives that were apparently smuggled to him in tissue packets, he took 4 guards hostage, blasted his way through 5 reinforced doors, and then used his hostages as a human shield to get past the snipers. He was free, but only for about 6 weeks before they caught him. And that brings us right back to the beginning, to the final act, the one that made him a global headline. Section 5. The Helicopter Heist. This is the story of how he escaped that supposedly unbreakable Rédoine prison. The planning for this was pure cinema. His accomplices posed as flight students and hijacked a helicopter. They knew from flying drones over the prison that there was one tiny courtyard in Rédoine without any anti-helicopter netting, a single weak spot. And that's exactly where they landed. 2 masked men with assault rifles jumped out, used a power saw to cut through the doors to the visiting room, and just walked Faïd out. And as he was leaving, Faïd coolly turned to the stunned guards, gave them a little salute, and hopped onto the helicopter. The entire brazen operation took less than 10 minutes. This escape was a massive national embarrassment for France. It triggered one of the largest manhunts in the country's entire history. Get this, 2,900 police officers were dedicated to finding just one man. For 3 months, he was a total ghost. And where did they finally find him? Hiding in plain sight, right back in his hometown. His downfall wasn't some big shootout. It was a piece of surveillance footage that showed a figure in a burqa walking just a little awkwardly. The police suspected it was a man in disguise, and they were right. The great cinematic gangster was caught. Today, he's in solitary confinement, all the theatrics gone, where he's reportedly strip-searched up to 5 times a day. So that's the story of Rédoine Faïd. And it leaves us with a really fascinating question, doesn't it? Was he a true criminal mastermind, a modern-day Moriarty? Or was he simply a man so obsessed with the movies that he tragically and very dangerously tried to write himself into his own film? What do you think?